Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Sam IT. I'm Scott Allen Miller, and today we're going to tackle what's the difference between an MSP and a VAR. We talked about VARs in the last conversation, but it's very common for people to confuse MSPs and VARs. So common that maybe even the majority of people who work for VARs think they work for MSPs, mostly because VARs often sell themselves as MSPs, and in many cases companies function as both, with the MSP function being kind of part of the value add in the VAR. So VARs, as we talked about in the last video, it's a value added reseller, so it's someone who sells things but has value add. We consider VARing, if that's a verb, to be what we call a taint. Once a VAR, always a VAR. The fact that you're a VAR kind of overrides everything else, not because it's big and evil or because it's toxic or anything of the sort. It's simply because the behavior that makes you a VAR is the kind of thing that's sort of universal, and anything such as being an MSP simply falls into the value add portion of being a VAR. In a way, you could think of a pure MSP as being a value add without being a reseller, but that would be a real weird term because you're not adding the value to anything in particular, you're just providing value. And it would be really weird to just call you a value, so instead we call you an MSP. Anyway, so VARs are a more encompassing term. Basically, if you provide any kind of technology services and you also resell things, at least within the technology space, you are a VAR. You can be an MSP plus a VAR, but you're really a VAR. Presenting yourself as just being an MSP is a bit misleading, to the point of maybe being questionably ethical or legal. You do need to always represent yourself as a VAR when you're a VAR. Or if you're going to do it as an MSP, point out that you do have VAR aspects, but you consider them relatively separate. You can let your customers decide how separate that is. As long as you're disclosing those things, there's no problem. That's up to them. An MSP is a little bit different as its own term. A managed service provider, which we'll cover in another video in depth, really refers to having packaged services that you provide to a customer. So it's not a natural thing for a VAR to have MSP services. It's not unnatural either. It's just not the most typical types of value add that you would expect within a VAR. So a lot of times a VAR will want to say that they're an MSP because they have a lot to offer that isn't implied or really expected from its value add nature in relation to its products. But they often go together, but they're definitely separate things and they work in different ways. The thing that you have to be careful with as someone who consumes services from an MSP and a VAR is that some of the things you expect from your MSP, such as giving you recommendations, come at odds with their nature as a VAR, which includes selling you things. And so there's a natural conflict between these two. And in a situation where there's a conflict like that, we always consider the one that is your adversary, in this case the sales team, to be the overriding factor. It doesn't matter how much they are your MSP and represent you, they are also your VAR and are paid to not represent you but to represent the vendor. They sit on the other side of the fence. Once a VAR, always a VAR. But it is legitimate to mix the two together. It's just important to remember that the MSP nature becomes part of the VA of the VAR, and the VAR is the overriding category of what you are. Generally, we expect that VARs, under the VAR category, will provide services specifically around the things that they sell. MSPs provide services specifically around packaged service packages. Things that are packages are packaged. What makes them different than, say, a pure consultancy is that their services come as predefined packages, and that makes them pretty popular with a lot of SMBs, but a little bit different than a pure consultancy, and that makes it a little bit important to remember how that name works. However, a lot of things refer to themselves as MSPs because MSP has sort of morphed into being a generic term for anything in the space, simply because people don't know what it stands for and it's what's popular. So people sometimes say they're looking for an MSP when they're actually looking for a VAR, and this leads to even more confusion because people on both sides of the fence are using the terms very loosely, even though they're pretty tightly defined. I hope that this helps explain the difference and the confusion and help you understand which you are, which you want to be, which you're looking for, and which you have. Remember to like and subscribe, put your comments below, ask your questions away. This one comes up a lot, so definitely ask some questions. Give me some examples if you want to help figure out if someone is a VAR or an MSP or a VAR with MSP aspects, part of their VA. And as always, you can sponsor us on Patreon, which will be linked in the description below. This episode of Sam IT has been sponsored by our friends at Talkadillo, the affordable, simple, fully managed, predictably priced VoIP PBX platform. Learn more at talkadillo.com and help to support Sam IT.